around 20 or something.
That's nice.
Yeah, around 20. For this session, to be honest, I have had a really busy week, so I didn't have the chance to like follow up on a few stuff that I usually do. But sometimes we even get 30 or 40 or something. It all depends on the topic and then the interest if they have time. Yes, we should be starting in a bit, but I cannot see anyone joining. Can you guys see? We should be able to see participants 6. We only have 6 now, and that should be us. That means it has not logged to the other one. Laura, could you check that? You should be able to log automatically to the other one.
If you're wondering
Laura,
how much the draw was, this is how much.
Laura, you're muted, please.
Hi, Lydia.
Hey, could you, it's not logging us automatically to the other one like last time too. Same issue as last time.
There's one attendee here actually. We have got an attendee. We've got Thomas.
Okay.
So I'll send out a reminder just now so that everyone can get the reminder as well. But there is an attendee.
One attendee. Okay.
Yeah, there we go. Thomas has just written in there. Thanks, Thomas, for shouting out there. Did you get the email okay then, Thomas? I'll just send a reminder out to everyone so they've got the link to the top of their inbox.
Yes.
Great. Thanks, Thomas.
Okay, good. All right. Looks like we need to wait maybe 5 minutes past. Else we'll just start with one attendee, to be honest, and just move on because we may have time constraint later on if we don't start. But that's weird. They're usually more than one. Actually, around. Let me check Splash. How many said were coming? Yeah, we have around 12 guests or something. Okay. Well, look like this. Weird. Anyway, let's just go ahead and start. I don't know why the others have not logged in yet, but time is moving, so we'll just move on. Thank you guys for attending the session. Welcome. This is our Q2 session and the Tableau meeting. We are looking forward to learning a little bit about looking at data in different or other new ways that Zach Bowders will be presenting. We also have Ivanna, who will also present together with Iga. So you're welcome, Zach, to start, please.
Sure. So, hi, I'm Zach Bowders. And I'm here to talk to you today about thinking differently and how you look at your data, display your data, and play with your data. So I will be the antidote to the best practices session that comes after this, or alternatively, they'll be fixing all the damage that I have done in the next 15 minutes to half hour. So Steve Jobs famously said in 1997, think different. And that was a sales pitch for Apple. And that was before Apple was like really cool. That was back when he had returned to the company after leaving in disgrace. And they started making colorful, kitschy little laptops. I'm here to talk about thinking differently in multiple capacities. And there's reason I'm saying differently and not different. This is not a marketing slogan. It's not everyone thinks the same. So to that end, oh, sorry, that's my 7-year-old, not me. I'm Zach Bowders. I work at Jones Lang LaSalle, which, if you're not familiar with us, we have 91,000 global employees, and we're primarily a real estate services company, particularly a division I work in. What we do is companies have a lot of buildings and land and things that they need to manage, and we help them with that through a variety of services, and in my case, particularly BI services, helping them better understand their facilities, who's there, how much it costs to operate them, that sort of thing. I am a Tableau Zen Master, one of 46 in the world right now, and 3 of us work at JLL, which is pretty cool. I'm also a Tableau ambassador. There's a lot more of us in the world, I think about 150. Specifically, I am a Tableau public ambassador, which means I'm super involved in doing public data work, both of my own as well as promoting others. I am also a 2-time Vizzy Award winner. The Vizzies are an award given out at the Tableau conference by a famous Tableau podcast, the Tableau Wannabe. I guess they've changed their name to the Tableau World podcast recently, but it's a community voted award where just anyone can vote. So in 2019, I won Greatest Growth, which I take to mean I sucked more the previous year and then didn't suck as much in 2019. And then in 2020, I won Must Run on Coffee or Coke because I was incredibly prolific, both in terms of my public data work as well as starting a podcast, the Data Plus Love podcast, which is Ben Jones' company, Data Literacy, did a poll last year, and Data Plus Love won for 2020's most interesting data podcast of the year. So check it out, available on all your streaming platforms. I have an episode with Steve Wexler of the Big Picture and Big Book of Dashboards dropping next Wednesday. I am also the co-lead of the Memphis Tableau user group, which has been defunct for about a year because our group is even smaller than yours. And meeting virtually didn't make a ton of sense when there are so many other great options. But as things start to return to more of a physical presence, we are going to come roaring back to life. Anyway, that's enough about me. Let's talk about the fun stuff. Dyslexia, fun stuff. So I actually have 2 daughters, both of which are dyslexic and one of which also has dysgraphia. So if we were to think about dyslexia and dysgraphia in terms of computer terminology, dyslexia is garbage in. So they look at the page and it comes in a scrambled form. And this is all due literally to your brain wiring being atypical. So it's not like the way a conventional brain is wired, like you're literally hooked up a little bit differently. So I remember my daughter's in 1st grade, I was trying to read with her and she'd read down the page and she'd see the word when 3 different times. And every time she saw it, she thought it was a different word, even though it was the exact same word. And that's when we start to know there's something wrong. Dysgraphia is garbage out. So you know what you're trying to say, but it doesn't come out in the form you're expecting. So it comes out in a different format. Why am I talking about this? Great question. So my oldest daughter just finished 3 years at something called the Bowders School. The Bowders School is a school specifically for dyslexics. Something interesting about dyslexics is, because they see the world differently, a lot of really famous historical figures have been dyslexic because they're not coming at things from the same angle as everyone else does. They're forced to look at the world differently, just innately by the way that their brains operate. In fact, there is a method called the Orton-Gillingham method, which is used to teach dyslexics to read. Actually, anyone can learn from the Orton-Gillingham method. In fact, my youngest daughter is in a private school where everyone's just taught that way. And for the life of me, I don't know why everyone isn't taught that way, since it could teach everyone to read universally. But having said that, my daughter's school, much like Hogwarts, has broken the kids into different groups: the House of Einstein, Da Vinci, Jobs, and Edison, all of whom were famous dyslexics. So I'm piggybacking on the Jobs theme a little bit here. But the interesting thing is they compete for house points by doing extra homework and that sort of thing, and generally take a little bit of a sense of pride in their dyslexia as a superpower because they don't think about things the same way as someone without dyslexia. And as a result of that, sometimes they come up with unique ideas, much like many of the people you see here on this wall, not limited to, but including some of the famous dyslexics like Spielberg, Walt Disney, John Lennon, and Edison. So there's been a lot of famous people that have had this, this superpower conventionally. And what if we looked at our data differently? Like so many times when we look at our data, we're going back to some of the same ways of analyzing, same ways of presenting it. What if we just decided to sort of take a step back and look at our data in an entirely different way? So to that end, I've broken some of my thoughts on this topic down into 3 different categories with examples from each. All of which are from my public portfolio because I don't claim to speak for anyone else. So let's get to it. So first step is reject convention. So going back to the idea of dyslexia, if you're dyslexic, you're not going to be able to read the same way as everyone else or even perceive things the same way as everyone else. You're going to have to take a novel approach to learning. In the case of dyslexics, the Orton-Gillingham method. But in the idea of data visualization, there's a lot of different options you have. For example, what if we use something like a pie chart, which is typically a parts to a whole chart, instead to represent different aspects of an individual. So in this case, I took Marvel superheroes. Since they're hot, there's a lot of movies right now. And a lot of them are on different teams. A lot of them have different memberships to different groups. So instead of listing out memberships, what if we just use that circle and add color to it to indicate how many different groups someone's a part of? It's a very easy way to look and see how many there are, which groups they're in, and who belongs to what. I was also curious about color blindness. So one of the things about color blindness is you'll see that many of the percentages represented in terms of the population that has color blindness, particularly with women, is near zero, but with men is, around 1% or so. It's not the highest percentage. So if we threw this on a chart, it wouldn't look like much, right? Because we'd be saying, hey, very little people have this problem. But if I actually take what color blindness looks like, so if you look in the upper left-hand corner and see what someone with all these standard cones, I guess I would say, has, you would see red and green, I guess true red and green. But then if you look at 3 of the other forms of dyslexia, you can actually see what someone experiencing that, not dyslexia, color blindness, would be seeing. So I thought that spoke louder than actually making a chart showing those numbers in terms of size or volume, by actually looking at it, seeing that it looks different, and maybe taking that and being more conscious of our choices. Because even if it is 1% or less, we want our stuff to come through properly for people. We don't want to create confusion or chaos. There's a guy in the Tableau community, Doc Kev Elder, who teaches a university in Georgia. He has full grayscale color blindness, which I didn't actually know was a thing. So he doesn't actually see any of these. What he sees is just different grays. So I recall him talking about there was a throwback football game between 2 American football teams, not European, not soccer as we call it in the US, but they were wearing jerseys and pads and uniforms from what looked like the 1960s or something. So very little, no logos on them, not even names on the back, just like big numbers. And one team was red and one team was green. And to him, everyone just looked gray. He could not even differentiate between the players or the 2 teams. It was just a total loss for him. So I think about that, and I think about how so many organizations are married to the idea of like the RAG scale, like red, yellow, green, as like a stoplight approach, and how impossible that would be for him to interpret just on a color scale. This was an example where I found a set online of video game sales data. So there are many ways to sort of express the idea of growth, volume, change over time, all of that. And all of them can be effective in their own means. I could have used histograms. I could have used line charts. I could have even used an area chart. I chose an area bump chart here, which is a super exotic chart type, and took me, I kid you not, like 15 tries to make happen right. And why? In many ways, it's less clear. Like when I look at this chart, it's not as easy to determine exactly how many of something there are, right? There's not an axis on here. I could potentially hover on it and see it if this were in a PowerPoint deck. But really, the illustration I wanted to make was that the video game market has experienced many periods of growth and decline over time. Specifically, if you start at the left of the chart, you can see Atari as one of the forefathers of the market entering in the beginning and exiting not too much later in the early 80s. You see forces like Nintendo, which sort of pick up from there. Sega comes and goes. But then in the around 2008, you hit the peak of the market. And if you look at that red, that Nintendo, in comparison to their charts, you can see at the peak of the market was driven by Nintendo. And why is that? It's because this is measuring actual game units sold, not consoles, the games themselves. And the reason for this is everyone and their grandmother owned a Nintendo Wii at some point in the world, I'm convinced. I may be exaggerating slightly, but the Nintendo Wii came with a game, for many people, the only Wii game they ever owned, Wii Sports. So Wii Sports is single-handedly responsible for an extreme market growth in 2008. And you can actually see the market continues to decline after that, not because the market wasn't big, but because a single, basically one-time thing that came bundled with something else made the entire market swell. So by choosing an exotic chart type, first of all, you looked at the chart, right? Like if I had chosen a more conventional chart like bars, you'd pretty much be done with this pretty quickly. But just by choosing something weird it's a high risk, high reward situation. So it got some extra looks at it that might not have gotten otherwise. So 2 out of 3, embrace ambiguity. So going back to the idea of dyslexia, you have to really get comfortable with being uncomfortable because the world isn't designed for you. There's text everywhere, oftentimes in formats that's not super friendly to someone that's dyslexic. What if we were to embrace the idea that sometimes we're going to be working with data or expressing ideas that don't necessarily have a convention of how to express them correctly? Again, almost all my examples here, not work examples, but sometimes you're going to have to choose unorthodox methods at work. So Back to the Future franchise. Probably everyone has seen a Back to the Future movie at some point, but in the Back to the Future series, Marty McFly travels backwards and forwards in time. So in the first movie, he travels back to see his parents as his age in the 1950s. But the thing is, Marty's not just traveling forward and backward in time. He's also continually traveling forward because Marty's getting older every minute of that series, right? So on one hand, Marty's personal timeline is progressing forward all the time, no matter where he is geospatially, temporally, I don't know, in time. So I wanted to figure out a way to express that because the way time travel is often expressed is sort of forward and backward lines, which is one way of looking at time, but the characters themselves are continually moving forward. He's not getting younger. This isn't Tenet. So in Back to the Future, we see forward momentum across the chart as Marty's personal progression through time. Then we see vertical movement up and down as his time travels. So we see him born in 1968. In 1985, he travels back to 1955. Then around back to the end of Back to the Future 1, beginning of Back to the Future 2, he returns to a new version of 1985 where his parents are yuppies now. Then he travels to the far-flung future of 2015 where everyone has hoverboards and like the 80s is nostalgic. Kind of happened. Back to a crappier version of 1985 and so on. So you get the idea. Representing a non-linear concept of time in 2 different dimensions in the same space. How about this? Anyone ever read like a choose your own adventure novel? I don't know if those hit it off globally, but choose your own adventure novels were sort of for kids, and it was like an early video game in the sense that it's a book where at the end of certain pages, you get to make a choice. Do I enter the cave or do I climb the mountain? So you'd go to a different page, and depending on that, your story would branch in different ways. Many of times with you dying fairly gruesomely for a series for children, like surprising amount of death. But I decided to look at the idea of a choose your own adventure novel as sort of the multiverse, as a concept that we hear bandied about a lot in popular media. You know, the fact that there could be many different versions of you in many different worlds. One morning you ate fruit and one morning you ate oatmeal or something, and your day changed accordingly. So from the idea of the multiverse, if you look at the branching choices you could make throughout this book and sort of started it in the top left-hand corner of this, the further down the page you go, or the more choices you could have made within that storyline. And the further to the right you make is the deeper in terms of page count you make in the book. So each point is representing both a page and a choice number as you make your way through the book. So I found 42 potential endings in this particular Choose Your Own Adventure book. And how do you express that? I don't know. Like, there are many different ways that you would go about doing this, but very few of them are going to be conventional. Lastly, since I already mentioned Christopher Nolan once in the form of Tenet, I was sitting in church one morning with my head just full of thoughts, and I thought, how does the movie Inception actually work? And my associate pastor forgives me for this. He's a friend, so he liked the outcome of this. But anyway, so the movie Inception, if you haven't seen it, go watch it now. But it's essentially about a dream heist, and within this dream, don't read this too carefully if you haven't seen it. Actually, it won't matter. You'll be so confused. Within Inception, there's the idea of a dream within a dream within a dream. So throughout the movie, you start off in one dream, and then the characters enter a further level down, entering into another character's dream. So I actually came up with this idea. I was drawing it on the back of a church bulletin. And you're thinking, well, this isn't really data visualization, is it? Like, much like the last one, like, I don't see points. I don't see how you're like measuring something. Where's the qualitative and quantitative data on here? Well, these are all Cartesian mapped points. This is all made in Tableau. Like all this is XY coordinates. You can make anything you want in Tableau. And data visualization, much like a map, map is data visualization. And how do you map dreams? Like this. So actually, I discovered that Christopher Nolan had drawn out how the movie worked in a cocktail napkin at some point. And you can find that online. And it's not that different from this, which is kind of gratifying. But yeah, if you ever would like to understand how the movie Inception works, it does. And there is a logic to it. So my last of 3 points, reiterate relentlessly, which don't say that 3 times fast. I can't say it once at a moderate speed. But one of the things I learned with my daughter in school in dyslexia is they had a program called Birds, which is every single day she'd come home with a series of flashcards with different words on them. And we would have to drill on these words, but not in the way that you might if you were just practicing vocabulary for school. I would have her look at the word and I'd put the card down and I would ask her to spell it for me. And then I would ask her how many nouns are in it, or sorry, how many vowels. What the third letter is, how many of the letters are tall, how many of the letters are short, because working with dyslexics, they had to learn to think about the word as a whole rather than the individual parts. So like teaching them almost words as visuals rather than words as many of us learn them as, component letters made up, which is one of the reasons they teach dyslexics cursive almost immediately, regardless of what grade they're in. Because when you're writing in cursive, you have to think about how the whole word connects together rather than the individual pieces that make it up. So here I have 3 different area charts that I'm going to show you, all using the same data set. So many times at work, we're using the same data many times, unless you're strictly working with clients and you hit a data source once and move on and never think about it again. Many times you'll be revisiting the same ideas and you might have to look at them from different angles. So this is from a data source you can see at the bottom on Kaggle.com, one of my favorite places for fun data, which is US baby names and how they changed over time. So I thought it'd be really interesting to be able to compare 2 different names side by side. You could choose male or female because, many times, like I have a close female friend named Michael, and then I have male friends named Michael. So, depending on which, you can have different shapes depending on whether it's a male or female Michael, because Michael is obviously far more popular with males than females. So I came up with the idea of like, what if I made it like a card? So I can overlap these 2 things so you can see the most common area of when Michaels and Marys in this case being born. So Marys were popular before Michaels and peaked in 1921. Michaels were popular a bit later and peaked in 1957. And you can go to this on my Tableau public page. You could type in 2 names, say male or female, and it'll create a unique visual like this. And actually in the top corners, the cross and the X will change according to overall volume. So you'll even get like a unique design shape depending on what you can choose. And you can change the header to like happy anniversary or congratulations getting married, so and so. But yeah, I wanted to come up with a unique idea of looking at the idea of when people are being born and what the relationship is between them. Then I thought, there's that really, I don't know, you could say catchy or annoying song, a little bit of by Lou Bega Jr., where he sings about a whole bunch of different girls' names. And I was thinking about that data set. And it's like, based on when those different names peaked, if I assumed that, Pamela was born in the peak year for Pamela's 1954, by the time Mambo number 5 came out in 1999, she'd be 45 years old. So how old would the girls of Mambo number 5 be at the time he was singing the song, which in some cases is very comical, like Mary being 78 years old. Mary, not the most popular name, I guess, in the early 80s, around the time you'd have to be like, 18 or 19. And then Jessica really only peaked in 1987. So Jessica's would have been like 12 years old around the time Mambo number 5 came out. So no implications made there. In fact, I have a disclaimer at the top so Lou Bega doesn't sue me. But, it's I found it interesting to look at the idea of names from a different perspective by sort of locking in a specific time and saying, okay, tell me more about Angela's. And then one more pass at the same data set. What names are most popular and when? So if you see the top line chart, and again, these are for names in the US. I understand that names are different all over the world and different things come and go, but particularly biblical names are very popular in the US for many generations. And the generations on the area chart below are actually colored accordingly. So we've got the greatest generation, silent generation, boomers, Gen X, and so on. And we step down through this. This is actually a long scrolling dashboard page, which is something I very rarely do. But diversity in terms of overall names has changed dramatically over time. And by diversity, I'm not like assigning like any, basically I'm saying there are more names, more varied names. So in the beginning, if you look back at the greatest generation on this top chart, male and female are very close in terms of different names being used, total count. And then as you sort of spread out past the baby boomers, Gen X, and all the way up to Gen Z, you can see that both have increased in volume overall, meaning there's now more names being used, but females have increased more rapidly than males. So I wanted to look at the idea of when were names popular? So what was the most popular names of the greatest generation? So in this case, Mary and John. And then how did Mary and John play out over the rest of these generations? And then I'd skip down to the silent generation and sort of continue to look at it. And spoilers, Mary was also the most popular female name of that generation too. So there's so many ways you could look at the very same data set and come up with all sorts of different stories and ideas and even ways to express it. I mean, in all of these, I've used area charts, but I haven't used them exactly the same in each one. But all of them are telling different stories and sort of different unique ways of looking at it. So at the end of the day, what I'm trying to say is there's so many different things you could be doing with your data and thinking about your data differently and looking at your data differently. I mean, whether it be at work or a personal project or anything else. And sometimes, you know, it's a swing and a miss. Like not all those charts are winners. But sometimes by doing personal projects and getting maybe some of the weirder or bad ideas out of your head, you don't do those at work. Alternatively, maybe you're going to discover something new and unique that will be super useful. Either way, I'm a big advocate of chasing projects that you feel passionate about because it's hard to learn new things and it's hard to get good at them. But if you choose things that you're going to want to do, you're going to get better. And that's all I've got. Does anyone have any questions or anything? That's okay too.
If I could maybe have a question.
Sure.
So you have presented a lot of and you have used a lot of the different data sets that are kind of, if we can call them non-work related. How would you advise? So I found your presentation very, very inspiring, and I really like how you're using also your own work to present what you're trying to say. But how would you advise us to think differently in a work setting? Because
Sure.
I think that's a bit more challenging, or actually much more challenging than for our own personal projects. And maybe what is your experience with that regard?
Absolutely. Don't be afraid to ask dumb questions. So there are going to be on many projects, you have a lot of assumptions about the way things have always been done. And don't be afraid to be the dumbest person in the room because that makes people express the sort of root cause behind why stuff is happening. So many times there may be a certain assumption that this is the way we do things or this is the way this project needs to happen. And by asking, like, can you tell, like, why, you know, being very childlike about it. I mean, it very much in the way of I'm trying to learn and understand this better to make this work. But along the way, you may discover that the way things are actually working doesn't need to work that way, or there's a more efficient way of doing it, or alternatively, something's broken and no one even knew it. Additionally, we like to think about in terms of aggregating data as much as possible, you know, rolling stuff up to like the most concentrated volume. Don't be afraid of disaggregating your data as well. There are many times in which, you know, if you were to just show the average for a certain time frame versus actually breaking out and showing the spread across that, if you were thinking of work orders, for example, if you say, oh, our average work order for stage 3 is completed in 3 days, but if you disaggregate that, you might find that, holy cow, we have like 5 or 6 work orders that are like 300 days past due. And you'll miss out on that if you always aggregate everything to the highest level. I mean, at the very least, prototype it out and try it and see what you've got there. But that's some of my thoughts. Additionally, I mean, build for your audience. Don't build something that is for you, because ultimately you're trying to make something that can be useful to someone. So know who your audience is, know how they think and what they need, and then build to that. And it's okay to push them too. Like sometimes your audience is going to have very firm beliefs about what they want. They may really want a map on something. And you know that the map is not going to be as efficient as bars to show what they need. So maybe nudge them a little bit and make it so it's a swappable sheet so that they can have their map because that's what they said they want. But you can force them to also have the option of looking at the bar. Alternatively, if they insist on like red, amber, green, like the stoplight, use a parameter to make it so you can switch to like the blue, gray, amber, so it's more accessible, and maybe make that the default instead, so that they have to switch away from that if they would like the stoplight. There are many ways in which you can think differently, take different approaches, and also sort of advocate for like a better version of something.
Thanks a lot. But really inspiring.
Thanks.
Yes.
Anybody else?
Feel free to write your questions in the Q&A place if you have any questions to all our participants. And if there are no further questions, I'd like to welcome Iga and Ivanna, and Iga and Ivanna, pardon me, work together in Novo Nordisk. They're the gurus of data there, so they're going to give us all the best tips and tricks of best practices of what they're doing in Novo Nordisk. Yeah. There you go.
Very, very kind, Claudia. Thank you. We go.
Good. So I guess we can get started, or I can hear my own echo now.
Yes, can you see the
Can you hear
screen?
that? Yes. Can you hear my
Perfect.
echo?
No, everything sounds fine.
Okay, give me a second. I'll just take the headphones and hopefully I won't hear myself when I speak.
Sure.
All right, let's try this. Can you hear me?
Yes.
Very good, very good. No echoes.
Perfect. All right. 1 second. Okay, good. I can still hear some background, but that's perfectly fine. Thank you all to those who were able to join us today. So as Lydia has mentioned, Iga and I are going to present to you today on the Tableau best practices at Novo Nordisk. So I think from hearing Zach's presentation, we are doing he was talking a lot about thinking differently and having fun with your data, questioning your data. We're kind of doing a bit of an opposite of that, and we're presenting to you about best practices, meaning that standardizing a little bit the work in the work environment, how our analysts at Novo Nordisk operate. Nevertheless, we hope that we today with our presentation will be able to inspire you, give you some ideas on how you can also implement similar practices in your own organizations. And we also hope that we can get some insights from you and maybe some ideas how we can further continue developing a set of best practices that we have currently at Novo Nordisk. So what we will do today, as I mentioned, the general topic is best practices at Novo Nordisk with regards to Tableau. But what we will also explain to you is how did we actually came to developing a set of best practices, how we did it, why we did it, and also how are we planning on spreading the use of best practices in our organization. Because one thing was developing it, but now we actually are entering or have entered an even more probably challenging task, which is actually making our analysts use these best practices that we have in place. Good, so we can go to the next slide. Before we begin, just a few words about who we are. So my name is Ivanna. I'm a data analyst in a supply chain integration team within Novo Nordisk, which essentially means that I analyze and work with a lot of supply chain related data. For myself, I define my role within my team is that I enable and help my colleagues to essentially make more data-driven decisions. And that is done by, as I said, helping them to analyze data, retrieving data for them from our databases, and also by supporting them with a number of reports and KPIs we have in place.
Yeah, and my name is Iga. I am a senior business intelligence analyst within Global IT. And so as a part of my job, what I do is basically I provide consulting services within data projects. And what I like to think about when I create the solutions is creating the data solutions that have the user at its center. So very user-centric, very user-driven, the solutions that will be usable for everyone around, while obviously maintaining best practices throughout.
Good. And just a quick slide on actually for those who are not familiar with Novo Nordisk as an organization. So Novo Nordisk is we're a global pharmaceutical company. We are our primary kind of focus area is diabetes products, and we're supplying 50% of the world's insulin is actually supplied by Novo Nordisk. And in addition to focusing on the diabetes products, diabetes medicine, we're also developing medicine for a number of growth disorders and also hemophilia. We have a set of hemophilia products, and also have recently started focusing on the issue of on the problem of obesity and solving that. We are, as I mentioned, a global company. Not only because we are supplying, or we have we supply patients with medicine across the world, but also because we operate internationally. So we have offices in a range of different countries. We have production sites in different countries, different continents, and also as one of the numbers you'll see here on the right-hand side of the presentation. We have a lot of employees. There are around 45,000 of us across the world. So we are a big and global organization. And now we can move to the next slide. Good. So having finished with saying that we are a big organization, not surprisingly, we also we have big data needs, and we also have what I would call a mature analytics community. That is developed in Novo Nordisk. What you can see here on your screens is just an overview of the way that our analytics community is set up and the different roles we have in place. The reason why I want to mention this is to give you kind of an understanding of firstly the setup, but more importantly, kind of the scope of our analytics community, which will then also give you a good understanding of why we actually needed to start working on the best practices and have those in place. But if we look on what we call the spectators, so of course we have one layer within our analytics community, which is our spectators, which is called here, or we can also call them stakeholders or end users. So it's essentially our colleagues that are consuming the solutions, the analytics solutions we're developing for them. And just to give you a scale of how many actually, how many of the stakeholders or end users we have, we did an analysis at the beginning of this year in January, and we found that on a monthly basis we have around 10,000 unique users on the Tableau server, meaning there are around 10,000 people every single month on average that are taking advantage of the different solutions that are available to them on the Tableau server. And just to tie that back, there are 45,000 of us in total at Novo Nordisk. So you can see that there is a lot of there is a big need for these for the dashboards for these analytic solutions that are being developed. When we talk about our what on the board here, you can see it's called Tableau and Alteryx users, or we can also call them analysts. We also have hundreds of them because, of course, the need is there, and there is a big need for these analytic solutions. An important number to mention here is that we also did an analysis on how many actually workbooks we have on our Tableau server. And it turns out we have around, in 2021, the beginning of 2021, we had around 4,000 workbooks that were being used by our users. So again, a big number, which again reaffirms that there are a lot of solutions being developed, and there is a big need for them. And what's even more surprising is that the number that I just mentioned, 4,000 workbooks on the Tableau server, it is actually a 60% increase from the year before, which tells you that not only are we operating on a big scale and there is a big need for these different analytic solutions, but also that it continues to grow. And we are expecting to see a continued growth going forward. And this, hopefully these numbers and this overview tells you that and makes you understand why did we actually have a need, or why do we have a need to have some sort of standards as to how these Tableau solutions should be developed. Good.
Good. I'll now jump in. And before we actually dive into taking a look at what we've developed and how that looks like, I would like us to take a look first at why we actually did it and what are the issues and the challenges that we're trying to solve or counteract by developing that new set of best practices. So from the top, we've got the inability to verify the correctness and freshness of the data that's presented in a Tableau solution. So there has been plenty of situations in which we have seen stakeholders asking questions such as, when was this data actually last updated? Then the analyst, obviously, depending on the complexity of the solution itself, the analyst would have to go back, take a look at the Alteryx flow that would be probably producing that data. Then obviously Alteryx is taking data from somewhere else. That place is ruled by another refresh schedule. So it's pretty hard to answer that question straight away the moment the end user actually asks, which obviously decreases the trust in the data solution that the user is looking into. Not a perfect setup. Secondly, we've got our poor workflow and dashboard documentation here. You've been there as well. You open a workbook that someone left. You're trying to decode what happened and why did that person create 10 different calculations for 5 different things. It is obviously stealing a lot of time. It's basically wasting a lot of time to try to reinvent the wheel, obviously, when you're dropped into something you haven't developed, or even if you want to go back to a solution that you've developed plenty of months ago, you want to go into the second sprint, you open the workbook and you hit a wall because you didn't leave any even breadcrumbs for yourself to follow. So you have to basically decode the whole thing over again. The third thing is a plague of one-to-one recreated reports based on an old Excel setup. So obviously, with the introduction of Tableau into our landscape, plenty of old reports, primarily created in Excel, have been transformed into Tableau solutions. In some cases, it's been done well, so the report has been rethought. Basically, it's been reworked, and it provides some new value in comparison to the old solution. But in many cases, what we see is basically a one-to-one recreation of what was created in Excel previously, which poses a challenge when it comes to obviously the adoption of the new solution. If the user can still use an old solution, basically the two are the same. They are going to most likely revert back to their old ways. And basically the entire idea of Tableau, which is this visual guided analytics, is being lost in the sea of tables on Tableau server. Last but not least, we've got our server performance. So we've had plenty of situations where servers have been down. In some of the cases, it was actually due to some of the jobs that were running over time. Basically, we've had the server being jammed to the point of stopping altogether. Obviously, that's not great. It's a very stressful situation, especially if you have a big presentation to do in a moment, and that's something that we need to counteract. So, what did we actually do in order to fight those pain points? we've developed a Tableau best practices package, which consists of 3 elements that we're going to tell you a bit about in a moment. First of them is the new set of best practices guide on SharePoint. We have had, previously we've had a different set of best practices, but now it's actually it's been reworked and rewritten in order to fit a dashboard design process. Now, the second element is the workbook template, which our analysts can use as the backbone for their analysis. And then the third element is the My Tableau Statistics workbook, which provides the users with an overview of insights about their own content on Tableau server. So to zoom in on our dashboard design process in relation to our best practices, as I mentioned, we used to have a set of best practices already for both Tableau and Alteryx, but all of those notes, all of very, very important information for the users were lost and fragmented. Not really, no real red thread was actually present throughout that. So it was hard for a user to get in and follow any kind of flow. In learning how to develop a solution according to best practices. So in order to fight that, we've developed a dashboard design process that's divided into 3 stages, one before, during, and after you actually work in Tableau. And within that dashboard design process, we are starting off by actually getting to know the audience. So we are trying to help our analysts with sketching out the project requirements to actually allow for a constructive discussion with their stakeholders regarding the requirements of the project at hand. We also tell them about where to find information about the data that they may need. Who is it that they need to reach out to if they have any questions or concerns regarding the data, or if they simply don't know where to find it. As Ivanna mentioned, we've got our data stewards that are there to help our analysts with finding the right source of information. Third stage is choosing the right visualization type. So here we are supporting our analysts with some tools that will help them with choosing the right chart for the message that they're trying to get across, so that they can move away from reusing bar charts, line charts, and pie charts over and over and over again. Fourth element is keeping it simple and clean. Here we are sharing some thoughts on how to create a layout that will be clean, that will be understandable for the end user, and that will be simple enough for them to get the message as fast as possible. In the last phase, so in the after phase, here we are sharing tips on sharing the work on our Tableau server, so some pointers on how to publish the workbook so that it doesn't clutter the server itself, what pieces of information to include while publishing a workbook, and so on. And then the last stage is gathering feedback, which is obviously one of the most important in my perspective, from my perspective. And here we are giving our analysts some pointers as to how to include a button for sending an email directly to a report owner, or to gather feedback using a Microsoft form template that we've also prepared for the analysts to simply duplicate and connect to their analysis, so that they can freely gather feedback as they go, and when they're ready to revisit the dashboard for the next development sprint, they have all of the feedback in one place. So that's actually our set of best practices in that dashboard design process setting. Now, in order to support that, we've also developed a Tableau workbook template, which is supposed to serve as in 2 ways. First is it's supposed to be used as a starting point for the analysis. So basically, from the get-go, the analyst has a workbook that is pre-formatted. It has all of the fonts, all of the colors, all of the visual elements, such as a logo. All of it is there, so that they don't really need to sweat over formatting it, as often it is the last step of the whole dashboard development process. So we're trying to lift that weight off our analysts' shoulders. But it's also a handy tool for applying formatting to an already existing dashboard, because it's very easy to just copy a sheet from an already existing workbook and paste it into the workbook template with the formatting being applied automatically, which is a very handy way for applying a batch makeover to plenty of different reports. So what the workbook actually provides the user with is, apart from the README story, which it starts with, which explains the user how to interact with the workbook in the most productive manner, we also have a set of pre-made layouts with layout containers ready for the analysts to drop their analysis into. Obviously, when you're starting your journey with Tableau, containers may be a bit of a black box, and they behave funky at times when you're trying to create a layout that you're after on your dashboard. So in order to help with that, we've created those basically a frame for them to just drag and drop their analysis into. We have a few different options of those layouts, so catering towards different use cases. Apart from that, we've got a header in each of the layouts that I just mentioned. We've got a header with a consistent looking the dashboard title. We've got space for info button, as you can see in this screenshot right here. We've got space for our info button. We've got space for our containers, if our filters. If the filters do not fit here, we are placing them below. We've got space for data update time, and then the feedback button. So if you can already see, based on what I also said during the dashboard design process, elements of that have been worked into the workbook template, and that is primarily to make sure that the end users actually always know where is it that they can find a specific piece of information or a specific element. So if they're interested in finding out what is the actual idea behind this dashboard, they will know to actually hover over an info button that they will find next to the dashboard title. If they want to contact the owner, they will always know to actually click the feedback button next to the logo. If they're interested in knowing when was the last data update, they will always find it here. So basically getting our end users, actually making the experience a bit better for our end users as well in the process, so that they can feel comfortable by always being presented with the same structure of the workbook. Then the last element of the workbook itself is the documentation page. And in the documentation page, we are encouraging our analysts to include all of the information about any workarounds that they may have applied, and also, very importantly, a change log, so that the next person that picks the workbook up is able to actually pick it up seamlessly, and they will know who to contact with any questions regarding the current state of the dashboard. Now, Ivanna will tell you a little bit about the Tableau statistics workbook.
Yes. So the last element of the Tableau package that we have developed is the Tableau statistics workbook or dashboard. And here the purpose is to show our users how their dashboards are essentially performing. So what we're showing here, or what kind of information we're giving them, is they're able to go into this dashboard, and then it will kind of refresh and only give them information specific to them, all the dashboards they have developed. And the dashboard gives them information, gives them some statistics on, for instance, who are their top users, who is using their dashboards, how many users are they actually having per different dashboards, and also how let's say fresh the dashboard is, meaning has any of the dashboards not been updated in a long time. And the idea here is, by providing these statistics to our users, is that they are going to take appropriate actions. So in cases when they're seeing that some of their dashboards have not been used, have not been viewed in a long time, those are the ones probably that should be reconsidered, perhaps even deleted. If they're seeing that there are some dashboards where they were expecting more more stakeholders to be using, and they're seeing very little usage, and they can also, it's something that can also then bring to the person who asked them to develop these dashboards and see perhaps there is something wrong, and maybe the reasons why the dashboard is not being used as frequently as possible. But the point here is that by showing them these statistics, the hope is that our analysts are having a better overview of the performance of the different solutions that they are developing. And one thing to mention also about this dashboard is that this is not something that has been developed from scratch, not at all. This is something that we have used, we have found on the Tableau community, and this is something where we took inspiration from the Tableau community. So this is in no way anything new. So if you are interested in having something, developing something similar also for your organization, that you're very welcome to contact Iga and I, and we can point you to the right resources.
Yes, the idea is to work smart, obviously, and reuse any resources that are already available in the community. Since Tableau has a great community around it, it's a shame not to utilize that, especially in cases such as using the Postgres database behind Tableau server, which can be very tricky to work with.
Good, we can move on to the next one. And this is where we come to actually, now that we have developed this Tableau package for our analysts to use and to have some set of best practices in place. The question is now, how do we actually spread the use of it? And this is either as challenging or even more challenging than actually developing the best practices. And here we have a few ideas that we have come up with, and we are either planning to continue these ideas, or those are something that we're already working on. So some of the ideas we had on how to spread the use of it across the whole of Novo Nordisk is firstly on the left-hand side, top left-hand side, you can see that we at Novo Nordisk we're using Microsoft Teams, and we have a Teams channel specific for our analytics community. And what we have done already there is that, of course, when we have developed the best practices, we have also advertised them there so that our analysts become aware that there is a set of new best practices in place. In addition to that, what we do on a weekly basis is that we are posting a data tip of the week. So what we do essentially is that we have developed these best practices, and there are a lot of different tips and tricks we have included in there. And what we do is simply take one of the tricks that we have in place, and we just advertise it on the Teams channel, so that with the hope that if our analysts, if they're either not aware maybe of the best practices that are existing, or they have not had the chance to read them, then they can become exposed to some of these best practices, some of these tips already through the Teams channel. Another idea, and something that we are already acting on now, is to take advantage of internal BI meetups. So at Novo Nordisk, we, as you understood probably by now, we're a big organization, and we have also a big data community, a big analytics community. What that also means is that different departments, or even some sub-departments, have their own internal kind of analytics/BI meetups. And what we have been doing is that we have been asking to join these meetups and also and present there the best practices. And the hope here is that, again, instead of having our users, our analysts, go into the best practices and scroll down and read the best practices, we are kind of coming to them and showing them actually what we have available, and also demonstrating these best practices kind of to them during these meetups. Another idea that we are currently working on is to spread the use of best practices through trainings. So at Novo Nordisk, again, we have an external consultancy that is providing trainings to either new analysts or also current analysts, so trainings that are also more advanced. And here what we're doing is that we are collaborating together with this external consultancy who provides us with these trainings, and asking them to include the different best practices we have developed, Novo Nordisk specific, also to the trainings that they are then giving to our analysts. And that goes goes both for some introductory trainings and also for some trainings that are for more advanced analysts. And lastly, we also, this is the last point here on the bottom right is something that is just an idea now, but we hope to implement a bit later, is that we want to also add a link to the best practices in our Tableau server. So when our analysts enter the Tableau server, they're straight away able to get a link to the best practices. And in this way, we hope to remind them to remind them that there is a set of best practices that are existing and making it easier for them to then start using it. And we also want to include the link to the best practices in in Tableau desktop. So when we're going to be upgrading our current version of Tableau desktop, we want to also include a link to the best practices there, as well as adding the template that Iga talked about, also adding that to the Tableau desktop. Again, in this way, making it easier for our analysts to be aware of the best practices and also to hopefully for them to start using them. So this is all we had for you today. As I said at the beginning, we hope that some of the information we shared can inspire you and maybe inspire you to bring some of these ideas and implement some of these things that we've been doing at Novo Nordisk also into your organization. And if you have any similar experiences in introducing best practices or spreading them in your organization that you would like to share, we would be happy to hear that either during this meeting right now, or you're also welcome to contact us afterwards via LinkedIn.
Yes, I have a question.
Mm-hmm.
If you like right now, you have many tableaus that the analysts need to make for the reports, and the reports are many, and then these reports reach very different people in the organization. So I would assume that since it's a really big organization, there are some people who should not see some part of the report or given reports. Do you have like a governance framework to check, like, or rather to know who's accessing what? Because there are so many, it can be a lot of work for you to.
Yes, I can take this one, Ivan, at least start. Well, that's correct. Yes, we do have since we do have so many people and such a huge number of dashboards that they can access. Obviously, a lot of work is being put into setting up security around those workbooks. In some cases, what's applied is the basic permission settings on Tableau server. Obviously, our Tableau server, since it's huge, it's divided into sites. Obviously, that's one layer of security. So we have a pretty strict way of applying for access to a specific site. Then when it comes to a level lower, so specific projects and workbooks obviously have their own permissions on Tableau server. But in many cases, what we do is we actually use an access rights structure from the systems that the data is actually coming from. So basically, for example, when it comes to SAP data, SAP data, we have, for example, an Ultrix workflow on a project that I'm working on right now. I have an Ultrix workflow that is basically reading the access rights from the SAP side, and then combining that data with data on our Tableau server, and spitting out information for the end users according to their access on SAP end. But obviously, it's a very packed and complex issue, and no two solutions are the same. In some cases, row level security is applied. In some other cases, user filter is enough. But obviously, every time we have a project, it's always a discussion with the stakeholders on what is the confidentiality of the data that we're presenting.
Thank you. Anybody else have questions? All right, if there are none for the moment, I'd like to thank Iga and Ivana for their time. we really do appreciate, and this recording will reach a wider audience than we actually are today. So I'm sure that very many people will be pleased or rather regret why they were not able to join. But then I would also guess that we also had a Tableau last month. So others may have thought it's like maybe too close, you know. So that would be my thought, but I'm sure many would really appreciate that you took your time to present. Thank you very much, and I wish you a lovely weekend, everybody. Thank you.
Thank you very much.
Thank you.
Okay, have a lovely weekend. Bye-bye.
Bye.
Goodbye.